Have you ever said yes to something you knew was wrong? Not because you wanted to, but because the weight of disappointing people felt unbearable in that moment? The relief lasted maybe 10 minutes, and what followed has been with you longer than you would like to admit. People-pleasing is one of the most misunderstood psychological patterns in existence. It is not weakness. It is not a personality flaw. It is a survival strategy, one that was probably very effective at some point in your life. And it has a cost that compounds quietly, year after year, until the person looking back at you in the mirror is someone you only partially recognize. The Bible gave us its most precise case study for this in a man who stood in the shadow of one of the greatest leaders in history. His name was Aaron, and the golden calf he built while Moses was on the mountain is not a story about idolatry. It is a story about what happens when your need to be approved by the people around you becomes stronger than your connection to who you actually are. Moses had been on Mount Sinai for 40 days. 40 days of silence from the mountain. No updates, no timeline, no reassurance that he was coming back. Below, 2 million people in the desert were growing restless. Anxiety was spreading. Then frustration. Then something uglier. They came to Aaron, Moses' brother, the second in command, the man left in charge, and they said, "Make us gods to go before us." We do not know what happened to Moses. Feel the weight of that moment. Aaron was alone. Moses was gone. The crowd was not asking. They were demanding. He could feel the pressure of thousands of people who needed something from him now, and were not prepared to wait for a principled response. Psychologists studying the trauma response have identified 4 survival modes: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawning is the least discussed of the 4. It is the pattern of placating others, agreeing, accommodating, giving people what they want, specifically to avoid conflict, rejection, or the withdrawal of approval. It is not passive. It is active management of other people's emotional states at the expense of your own. Aaron did not freeze. He did not fight. He did not leave. He said, "Bring me your gold." What Aaron built was not just an object. It was a mirror. The crowd was anxious about the future, leaderless and spiritually unmoored. Aaron looked at what they needed, something visible, something tangible, something that felt like certainty. And he built it for them. He did not build what he believed in. He built what they required in order to settle down. This is the deeper psychology of chronic people-pleasing. It is not simply saying yes. It is the active construction of a version of yourself, or a version of reality, that reflects back whatever the audience needs to see in order to remain calm and approving. You change your opinion in the room. You adjust your values at the table. You manufacture a position, a persona, an altar, and then you stand behind it, holding it up, while something inside you quietly watches from a distance. Solomon Asch demonstrated this in his famous conformity experiments in the 1950s. When surrounded by unanimous social pressure, people will publicly affirm things they privately know to be false. Not because they are lying, because the psychological cost of standing alone against the group activates the same neurological threat response as physical danger. Aaron was surrounded by an entire nation. The social pressure was not just uncomfortable, it was total. And the fawn response, give them what they want, maintain the peace, survive the moment, fired with full force. But Aaron tried something else alongside the capitulation. He built the calf, and then he called it a feast to the Lord. He took a pagan ritual, built under direct violation of everything he had personally witnessed from God, and attempted to consecrate it with the name of the God whose instructions he was violating. Psychologists call this moral injury. It is the specific internal damage that occurs when a person acts in direct contradiction to their own deeply held values, not the guilt of ordinary failure. The fracture that happens when you watch yourself do something you know is fundamentally wrong, and then try to construct a narrative that makes it survivable. The feast to the Lord was not strategic rebranding. It was Aaron trying to maintain two irreconcilable identities at the same time: the faithful servant of God, and the man who gave the crowd what they wanted. He was the middleman between a divine standard and a restless mob. And the exhaustion of that position, holding both together, satisfying neither, is one of the most draining psychological states a human being can occupy. You recognize it in any person who spends their life trying to be everything to everyone, never fully honest with anyone, never fully themselves anywhere, managing the gap between who they are and who they need to appear to be, in every room with every audience at every table. Then Moses came down. He saw the calf. He shattered the tablets. He stood in front of Aaron and asked the only question that mattered. What did these people do to you that you led them into such great sin? Aaron's response is one of the most remarkable moments in the entire Bible. He said, "You know how prone these people are to evil. They gave me their gold. I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Out came this calf." Aaron watched craftsmen melt gold over a fire and carve an animal with tools. He commissioned it. He supervised it. He announced a festival around it. And standing before Moses, his mind produced a story where he had no agency at all. The calf simply emerged, as though he were a bystander at his own moral failure. This is not a lie in the ordinary sense. This is the mind protecting itself from a truth that feels unbearable. When the cost of taking full responsibility feels existentially threatening, when admitting what you did means confronting who you became, the psychological defense system constructs an alternative narrative, one in which you were the victim of circumstances rather than the author of a decision, one in which the crowd made you do it. The environment produced it. It came out of the fire by itself. Psychologists call this the shift from internal to external locus of control. And when it becomes habitual, when every uncomfortable choice is eventually reframed as something that happened to you rather than something you chose, genuine change becomes structurally impossible, because you cannot fix what you refuse to own. So here is what Aaron's story asks of you. Not condemnation. Aaron was not a villain. He was a man under immense pressure who reached for the tool most available to him. And that tool was approval. But approval seeking without an anchored internal compass does not just produce individual compromises. Over time, it produces a life that belongs to the audience and not to you. Here are 3 practical steps both psychology and scripture point toward. First, name the fawn response when it fires. The approval-seeking impulse moves fast. It says yes before you have consciously decided anything. The first skill is simply slowing that moment down, not suppressing it, noticing it. When you feel the pull to accommodate, to adjust, to give someone what they want at the expense of what you actually believe, pause. Ask, am I doing this because it is right, or because the silence of their disapproval feels unbearable? That question alone begins to rebuild the internal compass. Second, identify your non-negotiables before the crowd assembles. Aaron had no prepared position for the moment the crowd arrived. He had not decided in advance what he would and would not do under pressure. Research on values clarification, specifically from acceptance and commitment therapy, shows that the most effective protection against conformity is not stronger willpower. It is prior commitment to specific, named values. The person who has already decided what they will not compromise before they enter the room is far less vulnerable than the one who decides under pressure. Third, practice the specific honesty that repairs. Not generic apology, not "I should have done better." The same specificity required to break the guilt cycle applies here. Name what you built. Name who you built it for. Name what it cost you. Aaron's "out came this calf" kept him trapped. The people who move forward are the ones who can say, "I knew what I was doing. I was afraid. And I chose the crowd." That sentence is the beginning of a different story. Drop a comment below and tell me, Is there an area of your life where you are currently maintaining peace at the cost of honesty? You do not have to name the specifics. Even identifying the pattern is the beginning of something. Subscribe for daily videos where psychology and scripture examine the same human experiences together.